What is up, everybody? Logan here again with another video coming right at you guys. And we actually have Halcyon back on the channel again. And that was actually my most recent upload was, what are the skills and the mindset it takes to become a professional trader? And Halcyon said he wants to continue down that route and he's got a lot more stuff to show us today. So the market's actually up quite a bit today, 1.7%, which is huge. And you can see the VIX getting crushed a little bit too, down 8-9% right now. But yeah, I'm excited for you coming back on, and I'm excited to see what you got for us today.
All right, let's do it. I went long this morning, so that's why we're up about 1.7%.
No big deal.
Yeah. Going with size. So
This sucks.
that's what she said. So the what I want to follow up on, because as I've had as these things go, when you occasionally post something and then somebody sees it and they ask you follow-up things, and I had a conversation with a good trade, a guy that I respect, is a very good trader. And he's like, yeah, well, I saw the video and I was like, dead on. I feel like, and he's a professional trader as well. Dead on. That's exactly what I would have thought. He's like, there's another thing I probably would have added to that. And he mentioned, he goes, if somebody can't explain what they do in trading in like an elevator pitch in like 1 minute, the likely is they don't have a very good grasp themselves of what exactly they're doing. So I thought that was actually an interesting, relevant point. So just follow that up from our original video from a couple of days ago. That's worth just another little tidbit there. If you are unable to really explain what you're doing in trading, there's a good chance you don't fully understand it. And it's time to go back to the drawing board, do your deep dive, and make sure you get all the ins and out, right? I mean, the reality is it's self-leadership is what will make you or break you in this particular industry. And those who can go do it in terms of self-leadership are the ones who will win long-term with it. And the ones who can't will be the ones who are on the wayside and, singing the sad tears that trading doesn't work type deal. So wanted to do another follow-up, which I think is a topic that, well, actually, I'm quite certain there's not a single video on YouTube regarding this, because it is a unique perspective on tilting the edge in your favor. And that particular topic, it can be expressed in a couple of different ways. There definitely isn't a factor with actually knowing your edge and what the edge is. But in this case, we're going to talk about, we're going to shelve that for now. We'll bookmark that conversation for another time. This one is specifically on what I would say is a component that a lot of people do a disservice to themselves by stacking the deck against themselves this way. And so I want to unpack that, and hopefully maybe there's one person who hears this and says, you know what, that's an area that I can work on improving. That is a low-hanging fruit thing, but it has an enormous impact on your ability day in and day out. So let's jump into that. We're actually not going to use it's not anything market centric in any way. So we don't need any indicators or fund pages or any of that kind of stuff. Instead, we're going to go straight to just a sketch. All right. Just a nice little sketch pad. And on here, actually, let me adjust a couple of things on this. Let's get all this crap off of here so we don't see it. Make it easier. All right. Just want the sketch pad, nothing else. All right. So what I'm talking about is your ability to control your nervous system. Okay? So one of the key determining factors in peak performance, and in this case, we're also going to talk about peak trading performance, is the ability to tilt the edge in your favor when it comes to understanding the way our systems work from a nervous system perspective. So I want to walk through basically how the brain does what it does, and then hopefully that will open up some interesting questions with what do you do that may be stacking the deck against yourself, which potentially compromises your ability to get to where you need to get to. I'm a firm believer in you want to constantly keep trying to grow in all areas of life. And this one, I think, is an area that most people probably need to grow in. Specifically, when we look at the way that our dopamine centers get manipulated all day long, whether it's trading or social media, or otherwise, or other things or actions or behaviors we do that will constantly overactivate dopamine when it doesn't need to be on. So let's first, though, define really quick what I mean by this. And then hopefully this will all make sense when we pull all back together. So first, right, we've got here's Logan the stick man right here. Okay, and he's got one eye and another eye. And he's very happy. Get his mustache in there.
Yeah.
There and there's a nose. All right, here's Logan. And he needs to do some strength training, but that's okay. He's just a very skinny guy right now. Give him some shoes. All right, there's some shoes. Smaller shoes, small feet. That's okay. So we got a nervous system, right? And our nervous system's responsibility in large part operates subconsciously for the vast majority of it. Most of it is autopiloting most of the time. So one of the things that the brain does, which is really interesting, is about every second, it will take in about 10 million pieces of information, process, and then decide what sort of reaction you should be having based on what it's processing in over and over and over again all day long. Okay. So we'll take sort of two people, and then we'll bring this back into Stickman Logan in a second. Let's take one person who sets themselves up in such a way that their environment is filled with a lot of overly stressed oriented things, right? Like a bunch of stuff going on in the background, a super messy area they work in, lots of distractive noises. Okay, that's one person, plant them there. And then we have another person who is the opposite. They've got, say like it's a very cleaned up, organized place they're in. It's quiet. There's no distractions, no loud noise going on. When just from that very simplistic view, which person do we think is going to be more often stimulating make you a little bit nervous, a little bit more anxious side, or make you feel a little more relaxed and a little more chilled outside, right? And this will be somewhat obvious. So what we always want to do, if at all possible, what you can control, you want to control it. And in this case, with the way the brain works, is you've got two main functions in terms of the nervous system. There's what's called the parasympathetic response and the sympathetic response. Okay, and it's sort of like the scale that lives between each side, like so. Okay. Now, they each have their evolutionary functions. They each do certain components for you. Sympathetic, think of it this way. It's a scale. It's like a speedometer of the system. The sympathetic side is going to speed everything up for you. Okay? It makes everything go a lot faster. When your brain senses something that's, scaring you, a fight, flight, or fright type of response, all of that, it dumps all of its energy down here. Okay. And pushes everything in sympathetic so that you can immediately react to whatever that fight, flight, or fright experience is. On the flip side, parasympathetic is all primarily responsible for your recovery ability, as well as all the creative ability. All lives down on that end of the spectrum. Now, we're going to simplify a bunch of this because we could spend a whole bunch of time on just the physiology of the brain itself, but I don't want to do that because we'll be here for like 6 hours unpacking this. So just bear with me that we're going to do this in a very simplistic drawing, like a stick man. Okay. So parasympathetic, think of as all recovery oriented, right? It controls your ability to sleep, right? It controls your ability to daydream, to be creative, and a lot of your calming aspects live further down on this spectrum. You don't want to be all the way down in here. This causes a whole other host of issues being too far down here during the day. But at night, this is where you want to spend predominantly all of your time because this is how you're going to sleep properly. Now, take that idea and imagine you take somebody and they have set up their life in such a way that they are constantly triggering things over here, right? Where they're always on this end of the spectrum. Over and over and over again, they're always on this end of the spectrum, triggering sympathetic responses over and over and over, right? So in terms of like how this translates back to trading, I will bring it full circle. Don't worry, stick with me. So what we preferentially want to do, especially when we're awake, is we want to figure out how to get ourselves to hang out in this middle area. This is where you have enough of the parasympathetic bonuses and enough of the sympathetic bonuses, but this magic spot kind of lives in the middle. right? This is where the state of like flow exists. This is where you're in the zone feeling exists. It's right in these where you're kind of balanced between both sides. And anybody who's ever experienced that before, what's happening is literally you're stimulating the part of the brain. Specifically, it's a brain wave, a particular range of brain waves that control that for you, right? And so that's the magic spot. You want to get in there as often as possible, and you don't want to get pulled to either end. Now, here's an idea of what like sympathetic overdrive looks like. That will absolutely be you can't have high anxiety and not have a sympathetic system that's full on overriding everything else, right? So think about in a trade you may have gotten into and things go wrong, right? They immediately go against you, or you're getting tested pretty hardcore. What are the emotions that you experience when that's happening? Are you feeling chilled out, creative, ready to go to sleep? Or are you freaking the flip out that all of a sudden this trade is testing you and you got anxiety, your heart is kind of racing? You know, if it's really bad, you get like, I can't focus on anything. I'm like spinning in circles. I've been there before. I mean, I know what it's like. I've been there.
Oh yeah.
You know, you're kind of like in this inability to focus, inability to think critically in any way, like you're just in panic mode, right? And it just means that your sympathetic system has completely turned on and overriding your ability to logically think through this. So I know that, Logan, you and I have talked about this in multiple times where we've said, you know, you've got to do as best you can to get as much of what you're doing day in and day out into logic land instead of trying to be in the emotional state by which you are making choices with trading. And this is what I want to talk about today is how do you start tilting yourself to stay in that magical, in the zone, in that flow state with your trading. Okay. So first things first, the easiest by far well, actually, there's two main things, right? Obviously, knowing your setup frontwards and backwards. You got to know the setup backwards and frontwards. You just have to. You don't know a setup, you're destined to be then easily manipulated into the sympathetic response, which then makes you generally do stupid things and knee-jerk reactions, and put you in a place where you take losses when you shouldn't be taking losses, or you get out of profits way too early, because you have basically conditioned yourself to expect that make it feel like it's a complete random thing if you win or don't win, right? That there's no real setup that you're actually following. Second thing always is if you don't understand how to manage risk in your trade that you're doing, then you honestly should not take a trade until you fully understand backwards and frontwards. How do you manage the risk around that trade? What is the means and method? And that managing risk could be understanding where the expected moves are going to live, understanding where the 2 times expected move is going to be. It could be understanding physically, actually actively going and defending the position, you know, whether that's buying the opposite side or closing a side, or, I mean, there's lots of different ways to do it, but it is actually taking time and thinking through that. How do you defend? Those are all things we've talked about in the past. This specific thing we're going to get into, though, is what happens and basically how to tilt this the best way you can. So first things first, and this is by far the number one thing you can do, is get sleep. Bar none, this will be the number one contributor to your ability to control your emotions during the day, is directly linked to how well you sleep at night. Okay, so let's unpack that real quick. What is enough sleep? Because this is another thing that a lot of people have a misconception on, or think they're somehow unique, special snowflakes that they can get away with getting a lack of sleep and still function optimally. So the data is and the studies on this are black and white. There isn't wiggle room on this. There isn't like, oh, this is done by a Facebook group's study of 3 on their sleep study, and so I don't really believe it. This is done by legitimate sleep institutes, and this is the stuff they come back with over and over and over again. And these studies have been duplicated by different groups with and get the same results, which is just an additional yep, that's kind of the gold star there. So number one thing is that you need to get more than 7 hours of sleep. Okay, whether it's 7.5 or 8.5, whatever, is dependent on per person, but minimum is 7 hours of sleep. Okay. If you are unable to do that, you are compromising a couple of things, specifically your ability to maintain focus throughout the day and more importantly, your ability to maintain your emotional state throughout the day. Okay. So the studies they've done where they've taken people and they break them into 4 groups, right? And they take group 1 and they, which I hope I was in group 1, but they take group 1 and they get to have 7.5 hours of sleep or more for this part of the study. They take another group and they give them 5.5 hours of sleep, which is about what the average person is sleeping, around 5.5 to 6 max. Then they take another group and they give them 4 hours of sleep, and then take another group and they get no sleep. How miserable would that be the no sleep group? Yeah, right. That would suck. And then what they do is they have them, before the study starts, they take a cognitive test. It's an attention test, a focus test, and then just cognitively can they pull information and answer these questions. And they have them take this test. So they get a baseline score. I think they do it 2 or 3 times before they actually do the study. And then they have a baseline of this is what they are with focus and their cognitive abilities with their normal sleep routines. Then they start the cycle. And so they have everybody do their hours of sleep. They wake anybody up who is at the 5.5, 4 hours, and then the no sleep people get no sleep, right? And then they do this at the same time every day, and they retake that exact same cognitive test, and they want to see what kind of decline shows up in the focus cognitive side of things from the sleep, from anybody getting less than that 7.5 hour sleep. Okay. What they find is that the group that is the 5.5 to 6 hour group has a very, very similar response after about 3 days to the group that's getting 4 hours and 0 hours of sleep. Okay. Which is, it should be alarming to yourself if you're like, you know what, I only really get 5.5 to 5, maybe 6 hours of sleep a night on good nights. And here's the interesting quirk with that. So they would take this test, they would get scored, and then the test givers would ask the test takers, how do you think you did compared to the first time taking it? And without fault, everybody who was in that 5.5 to 6 hour group was like, I'm pretty sure I did exactly the same. I felt no different. I was able to, the answers came to me, blah, blah, blah. But then when they actually got the data and looked at the data, that 5.5, 6 hour group, you would see their scores decline and decline and decline and decline every single day after about day 2 or 3, somewhere around day 2 or 3, to the point that they would start scoring like the group that got no sleep for the first night, right? Now, of course, they only did that group with no sleep. I think they did 2 nights of no sleep with them, which, yeah, misery. But think about that. They were cognitively at the same place as the person who had no sleep. And this was probably about 6 days in of the 5 or 6 hour group, cognitively about the same. Why that's important to know that is because there's this like little subtle thing. Our brains are absolutely amazing at adapting to the environments we put them in, our bodies for that same manner. Because what will go on is that you don't realize that this is happening to you. You don't realize this subtle decline takes place, and you think you're operating at a place, you're like a normal optimal state of you, especially when you're operating in this like 5.5 hour sleep deal, which is kind of scary if you think about that, where you think you are doing the best you can do, and that there are factors that are outside of that, which may be prohibiting you from making the choices, the wisest choice you can make. But the reality is, if you live in that category where most people live in, which is that 5.5 hour-ish range, you are leaving so much of your cognitive power on the sidelines because your brain is in a major sleep deficit. And who knows how long you've been doing this pattern where it's extremely sleep deprived. The reason why I bring that up is because how much sleep you get will be a direct reflection of how well you can control your emotions. And we all know in trading that emotions play a big, big deal, and that we spend a lot of time doing what we can to mitigate the emotional override that can tend to take place when we look at what our normal day-to-day looks like, right? Because I don't know about you, but some of my absolute dumbest trades have come on knee-jerk emotional reactions, whether that's FOMOing it in a trade or FOMOing out of a trade. And I will say, I'll bet you anything, if I were to go back and look at that log of dumbest trades ever, I'll bet anything if I had my sleep tracking at that point lined up, it would be some of the times where I had some of the worst night's sleep or a stretch of bad sleeping. So I bring this up to people just to get them aware that, hey, this is one of those low-hanging fruit things, is to get yourself in a position where you tilt the deck in your favor. Stop sleeping 5.5 or less hours and think you can actually function. The statistical percentage of people who actually can function on less than 5.5 hours of sleep and be at their optimal is like 0.0001.
Wow.
Tiny. And guess what? You ain't one of them. You
Yep.
don't fall in this category. So, if you want to have the highest odds of staying in this magical zone, this, the flow state, where you're able to access analytical information and stay focused, but also have the ability to be in a creative state, this is where that lives. Right. And that's like the few times that people experience that, were like, damn, that was amazing. I was just on, like, I could recall the information I needed. I could see the charts the way I needed to see them. Everything was just lining up. I saw it a different way. That's what that is. Right. But it's really hard to do that if you're not sleeping appropriately. So one of the simplest ways to start getting yourself figured out in this spot is just break sleep down into smaller increments of how it works. Sleep generally for most people is 1.5 hour blocks is how that works. A typical sleep cycle lasts about 1.5 hours. Some people a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, but on average, it's about 1.5 hours. And you're trying to get about 5 of those 1.5 hour blocks a night. Okay. One of the things you can do as you start working on this habit, right, and this behavior, is basically calculate forward at what time you want to wake up. What you want to do is look at where the time is that you want to wake up. So let's say you want to get up at 7 a.m., or I would say Eastern, 7 a.m. Eastern. And so if you just go back 1.5 hour blocks, you can figure out roughly what time should I be asleep so that I can wake up at the end of a sleep cycle and feel refreshed and ready to go, right? Versus waking up in the middle of a sleep cycle, which feels like absolute dog shit, by the way. You want to wake up at the end of a sleep cycle if possible. So just do the timing and work it forward. So if you went to bed, say at 10 o'clock, well, 10 to 11:30 is one sleep cycle, and 11:30 to 1 is the second sleep cycle. 1 to 2:30 is the third. 2:30 to 4 is the fourth, and then 4 to 5:30 is the fifth. And then if you do 5:30 to 7, that's your sixth. And so there you go. You've got your blocks of time in. And then you wake up exactly at the time you're trying to get up on. And you will feel like $1 million once you start doing this thing on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. So that's what I wanted to add into this picture as we start looking at the different things you can do to, again, try to maximize your ability to control your emotional side of things. If that's an issue that you've been dealing with, which for a lot of people, that's a major problem, is the emotional aspect of trading. Look at your sleep. I would take a first look there and say, how am I sleeping? How many hours a night do I sleep? And if you don't have any idea what that is, absolutely take a look, because most people do not prioritize that at all. And I mean, by the way, sleep pretty much is going to dictate almost every health aspect in your life. So if you do not know, start taking a look and see where you land on that thing, because it's going to makes a huge difference. Trading rested versus trading tired. It's a huge difference in your ability and performance. So that's what I got for you guys. Wanted to just bring that to your attention. I thought it was worth discussing, and hopefully they'll bring up some questions. If you have questions, obviously post them on the video, and we'll answer them in a follow-up item. We've got lots and lots of information on how to sleep better, but we'll do that in a different video.
Yeah, that's one thing I was gonna say really quickly is, like, I definitely am not one of those people that can sleep 5 hours and feel good at all. And even, like, I swear if I wake up in, like, in between a sleep cycle, like you were saying, whether that's REM sleep or whatever cycle it is, when you wake up in the middle, like, I legitimately feel sick, which is like, I literally feel sick, and it takes me at least an hour to get out of that mindset. Which, and that kind of sucks too, right? Like, it may not totally be in your control on waking up in the middle of the sleep cycle. So that's always like one piece that is not ideal. But no, I appreciate you sharing everything you did today. And I definitely think that's the number one, thing for trading or doing any sort of, like, successful work is you just have to be mentally pieced together to do it, right? And have the endurance. And the only way to keep your energy up is to sleep, right? And get good enough sleep to where you can make it through the day and actually like, you know, do what you want to do. So I don't know. I think it's really cool and I really appreciate you sharing everything today. And I'm excited to see where this series continues to go, which is this like full-time trader mindset series, and just how like you have to be at the top of your game if you want to win the title,
I mean, yeah, trading is, trading is
like
is
fighting.
an uber competitive sport. Think of it like you were an elite athlete, competing in your sport, and the goal is to get the highest score, aka highest account balance. And you know, look at your actions and behaviors, what you do. Are you doing things that are going to give you the chance to make that happen, or are you doing things that are pretty much there's not a chance long term that's ever going to take place? I just did a little doodle on the bottom here just to clarify for anybody. So in general, most of the time when you look at your sleep structure, deep sleep is going to happen in the front half of sleep. So typically the first 3.5 to 4.5 hours, depending on how active you were, will be all the deep restorative muscular side of sleep. There's some light sleep that takes place in there, and we'll unpack what that is doing. But then the back half of sleep almost exclusively is REM sleep. Occasionally you'll have a deep sleep show up in there, but mostly it's REM related sleep, which REM is doing all of the cognitive brain side of things. You flush out toxins out of your brain. One of the reasons why you get real short sleep, like say you get 4.5 hours of sleep, a lot of time you'll see you're getting headaches after that. Most of that's because you didn't flush toxins out of your brain, and you're sleep deprived. So your body is pissed off at you. So, but anyways, REM is the last half of sleep. That's where all your memory consolidation processes take place. So you go from short-term memory, you take something, consolidates what's important and puts it into long-term memory. And again, every time that you do short sleep, you are sacrificing that last chunk, right? Because in an evolutionary perspective, your brain was designed to say, hey, at very least, we got to get the physical side out of the way just so we can get up and not get eaten by a tiger tomorrow. But on the second half, we get the luxury, let's add in all the brain side of things and do the repair and cognitive response that we want to happen on the brain side of things. And as humans, we are primarily, we primarily are brain driven on what we do. It's not primarily a physical driven thing anymore. Not everybody's getting up and working the lands and hunting and foraging and that kind of thing. We're mostly doing stuff that requires your brain to be in a peak performance state. So I would highly suggest start looking at this. Pay attention. Good first step is just take a little notebook and write down what time am I going to sleep every night and what time am I waking up. Regardless of what you're actually, if you don't have a device that you can look at what your sleep structure looks like, that would be at least a very tiny first step. Is just pay attention to it. See where you are and see if there's some kind of pattern or trend that's showing up, and then you can take some actionable steps on that. And maybe we could do another one and talk about actual like physical things you need to do to get like your best optimal sleep going forward. So
Gotta run.
there you go, my man.
Literally gotta run. Gotta be active.
Yeah, man, get moving, lift weights.
Well, I appreciate you coming on for another one, Halcyon, and it's always great tidbit of information. And I'm excited for more sharing more of this because that's something I've noticed too. And this is the last thing I say before we wrap the video up. It's like when I first started trading, I was not very active in general, and I'd say I'm much more active now, and my trading reflects my performance is reflecting basically all of that combined. My trading's getting better, I feel healthier, I sleep more, I eat better. And I think all of those combined just make me feel so balanced that, I'm able to make really solid decisions pretty often.
Well, it's been showing up in your performance for the last however many months at this point. You've been on fire lately. So yeah, man, like I said, trading is not a part-time game. Like you can't part-time come in and try to trade. It just doesn't work. It's investing. Yes, you can part-time deal with the investing side, but trading is different. You have to like either be in it. There's no halfway trader. It's either you're in or you're not. And halfway traders are the ones who don't do it very long. They play around, lose some money, and disappear. That's just how it goes.
100%.
All right, dude, I'm out. I'm gonna go enjoy this beautiful sunshine. I got no positions on except I'll look at it, maybe a put credit for Monday. So that's it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on this one, and If you guys have yet to leave a like, a comment, or subscribe, you guys can do that now. And then if you guys want to come trade with us, the link to the Discord is down in the description. That's going to be everything for me, and we will see you guys in the next video.